Welcome to this series on Pharmacy Operation Basics. I'm Joey Mattingly. Today we're going to be talking about process improvement. The learning objectives for this video are to be able to describe the plan, do, study, act cycle of process improvement and to be able to apply this cycle to a pharmacy scenario. One of my favorite process improvement models to teach to PharmD students is a pretty straightforward model. It's I would say basic, and that's sort of why I like to bring it in as an introductory module for PharmD students in their management course. Because as a pharmacy student, you're not trained to be a process improvement expert. If process improvement, quality improvement is something that you want to pursue later in your career, I highly recommend you to spend some time searching the field. There's some great process improvement programs you can participate in. You can certainly look into Lean or Six Sigma training programs. There's just a lot out there in terms of process improvement. But for an introductory course to be exposed to these types of trainings, I think the PDSA is a pretty good place to start. So plan, do, study, act is certainly just how it sounds. We start with planning. So we want to identify an area for improvement and try to find what causes there may be for problems that we want to see if we can address. Once we've identified a problem and something that we can possibly do to address the problem, we would then experiment with a change on a small scale. And after a period of time with our pilot, we want to measure the results, right? We want to see if the data actually changed, if intervention worked. Based on those initial results, then we may act further and try to implement those changes on a larger scale. If not, we may go back to the drawing board and start planning and begin the cycle all over again. So let's walk through an example. Here's a layout of a community pharmacy, a pretty basic layout. For those of you who have worked in a community pharmacy, this may seem familiar to you. We have the workflow that's represented by the blue arrows in a clockwise fashion, where prescriptions are dropped off and entered into the computer via the data entry station. Labels are then used to fill the prescriptions at the counting station. The pharmacist will then verify the prescription at the RPH station. Finally, the prescriptions go to a will call bin and picked up by the patient that's in the patient waiting area. In this example, do you notice any operational weaknesses or potential improvements focusing on the layout of the pharmacy? So notice we have our drug aisles, and you can kind of imagine that those are shelves with drugs maybe on both sides of the shelves. So technicians or pharmacists would walk up and down each aisle to identify drugs, right? So you've got drugs maybe alphabetized A through G, H through N, O through R, S through Z, and then maybe a separate section for drugs that are over the counter but kept behind the shelf. So those may be things like pseudoephedrine. So in our planning phase, we might say, well, looking at the layout of where our drugs are, would it be helpful if we actually had, instead of just alphabetized order, what if we actually had fast movers, right? What if we actually took a section of our A through G section, and what if we broke that out and we took a piece of it and we put only the drugs that we most commonly use? So maybe we start with the 100 most used drugs in the pharmacy. So we go to all the trouble of rearranging our shelves. We get the fast movers that are in a more close proximity to the counting station where they would most likely be used by a technician fulfilling or counting and dispensing the medication. And then in our study phase, we're going to try to measure things like our prescription dispensing times. Do we have like a wait time metric or a ready when promised metric? What are some metrics that we might have? Whatever comparable metric you may have to see if the counting technician is more efficient in the new section. You could even measure out the steps that the pharmacy technician takes in a day. You could see if a technician would be willing to wear a Fitbit maybe to see if they end up walking a lot more or walking a lot less, right? So you would probably hope that they may walk a lot less when they're at the counting station if the fast movers are much closer to them. If the pilot worked, we could implement a much larger change and move the section out to see where we now put fast movers across 3 of our shelves. So now maybe we have the top 200 drugs or something based on our utilization data. So now we'd go through rearranging the pharmacy shelves to see that our highest volume drugs are closest to the station where they travel to the most. Process improvement is a cyclical event. It's not something that you just stop after you've tackled one problem. Once you act, you continually go back to the drawing board and see what other things you can solve. And then you try to pilot a change and study those effects that demonstrate any value added. You don't just want to change things in your pharmacy just for change's sake. That concludes our video on process improvement. Again, if you have any questions, you can email me. Also, for public comment, you can contact me via Twitter. If you're not enrolled in the class, feel free to leave a YouTube comment below, and if any comments that might be helpful to the course, I'll happily include those and share those with the class. Thank you.